Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Jason Aldean called They Don't Know. You know, I put up with a lot coming out of Jason Aldean, and make no mistake, it seems like every single time he opens up his mouth in an interview, I end up finding more things about him that frustrate me or piss me off. Well, it's because I should like this guy more. For one, he's one of the few independent country artists to have consistent chart success on mainstream radio, and you can tell in terms of his sound, he at least tries to push into some new directions. Don't get me wrong, Burn It Down was awful and helped push the metropolitan country trend that followed in the aftermath of bro country, but you could tell it was coming from a mostly unique perspective. There was some creativity there. And to give Jason Aldean a little bit more credit, he does occasionally put out some songs that I really like. A deep cut called Don't Change Gone actually landed on my list of my best songs of 2014, and that list did not include the hits. I wonder why that was not a single. But eventually, you start shifting towards a tipping point, and the lead up to They Don't Know, well, it was mixed to say the least. I didn't mind his more country rock inspired lead-off singles for this release. They weren't bad, but then you balance it with the incident where he got caught in blackface at a Halloween party, or how his anger at the term bro country increasingly tilted towards intentional ignorance. Yes, you weren't at the forefront of the movement the same way Luke Bryan was, but don't think you weren't part of enabling the environment. And then when he went to Billboard and said that he was intentionally choosing songs for his albums that weren't too clever or songwriterly for his albums, I just about had it with this guy. Sure, Jason Aldean, I get it. Not all country music has to be insightful or contain emotional nuance, but if you're gonna embrace the alternative, can your production be a little less colorless and your music be a little bit more fun? Granted, there's a suspicion I've discussed with fellow country fans that also feels that Jason Aldean's kind of jealous of the reputation that, say, Eric Church has built for himself as the outlaw in mainstream country. But, you know, Eric Church chose to embrace his singer-songwriter instincts that, yeah, were a little bit weird, but actually gave him some real personality. Jason Aldean has never seemed willing to compromise his swaggering alpha bro image, which, as country swings back towards more quality, makes him just kind of appear kind of one-dimensional. But whatever. We've got this newest album, apparently delayed from release on streaming services so that Jason Aldean can get another #1 album on pure sales and for the headline of Standing Against the Man. But whatever, how did that turn out? Well, I'll say what I said on Twitter after my first few listens through this. This is easily one of those tedious, one-dimensional bores of an album that you would hear in 2016. You thought Views was drab? Get ready for 15 tracks of generic writing, mediocre to bad production, and a singer who knows that if he shovels out an album every couple of years, he's gonna make money from an audience that really does deserve a lot better. I don't even want to review this, and really, there's a part of me that just kind of wants to abuse They Don't Know for 5 minutes, fill up the clock here, just punch out, but what is even the point of getting mad at this? I can't even say that it's aggressively bad to listen through. Mostly because it feels like if you heard one Jason Aldean song that's okay, but nothing you're gonna care about off this album, you've heard pretty much all of them. And when I say that, I'm not entirely referring to the lyrics. We'll get to those, I promise. But the production and instrumentation, crunching rock guitars, drums that alternate between abusing cymbals and overly programmed, you're not sneaking those stuttering trap snares past me, Jason Aldean. From Lights Come On to the title track to One We Won't Forget to When the Lights Go Out, and a blur of synth and steel guitar to blend it all together into a homogeneous blob. Forget a melody coming to the forefront to complement that vocal line, or an interesting solo that shows any sort of virtuoso talent from his band, or a bass guitar to drive any sort of real groove. Nearly every single song on this album falls into this mold, trying for swaggering machismo, and instead falling far closer to the dreary, bland slurry that ruined so much of post-grunge. Or worse still, the overmixed sludgy sound with the badly layered string sections that was popular in the 2000s that shows up with a duet with Kelsey Ballerini on First Time Again. And if the guitars had anything close to real bite or muscle or raw texture, or if they thought to add real color to anything, this could potentially work. I've always said that Jason Aldean can at least pick songs with an underlying melody with a tendency towards minor keys that at least doesn't feel conventional. And you know, when he does let pianos and organs through on Whiskeyed Up and Reason to Love LA, they don't sound bad, but that melody is never the main focus of any of these songs. And when it is, the tone is so muddy and watery that it carries no actual body or impact, especially against the drum machines, the monochromatic riffs, and a drippy mix that has depth but nothing else. And that's the other infuriating thing. Songs like This Plane Don't Go There actually have the potential towards a more spacious sound like Dierks Bentley pushed to its illogical extreme on Black earlier this year, but Jason Aldean has no taste or sensibility for groove or atmosphere, and so he never really uses all that space to do anything interesting before the riffs just cut right back in. And now here's the thing. I would be lying if I said that there weren't a few of the melodic grooves that kind of work. The opening riff on Comin In Hot isn't bad, especially with the acoustic touches. There was some nastiness to the riff on the title track that had some punch to it. The sparse acoustics balancing against the distant pedal steel on In Case You Don't Remember was pretty enough, and there was a hint of smolder on All Out of Beer that could have taken somewhere interesting with a little bit more restraint. If only the lyrics could remotely pay off any of these songs, add any sort of nuance or intensity to make them remotely interesting. Unfortunately, this really doesn't happen, as there are two types of songs on this album. Party and hookup tracks that are as generic and forgettable as they come, and aftermath of relationship songs that can't remotely approach what Jason Aldean already delivered with Old Boots New Dirt back in 2014. Let's start off with the first category, and where the lack of specific details or stories really hurts these songs. It's not that they're outright awful in their details, like say a Chase Rice would be, although Comin In Hot doesn't help itself with Jason Aldean giving his girl a time limit on how long she can get ready. When the Lights Go Out describes sex as him falling into her, cause that's sexy, and Bad is pushing the Madonna whore complex further than ever before, really kind of ugly there. But the larger problem is that they say nothing that stands out here. For as much as Jason Aldean hates the term bro country, the checklist nature of those songs and bargain barrel imagery really does fit the bill with this album. Where things get a little bit more interesting is the aftermath of relationship songs, and yet somehow all the more disappointing as Jason Aldean doesn't even try for greater emotional nuance. This Plane Don't Go There is so matter of fact it feels completely inert. He's not coming back to this girl, which gets a lot less excusable than when you get the drunken hookup on All Out of Beer. He's literally too drunk to bother to stop her when this ex comes around for sex, although he's quick to profess he's got all of his walls up. And then there's Any Old Barstool, where a writer with more subtlety would play with the newfound freedom with a trace of melancholy and loneliness after getting dumped by what sounds like his wife, but Jason Aldean doesn't deliver that, and the tonal dissonance doesn't work the way it really should. And then you have the sole exception of these categories on the title track, which is more rural pandering with how people in the city don't get hard work on the farm. But for a song playing in this lane, you'd really think he'd use some actual details to flesh out the song, but nope. Now, look, to be completely fair, Jason Aldean does bring together some traces of wistfulness to a little more Summertime, and especially In Case You Don't Remember, the latter, which is probably one of the best songs on the album. But it's a shame that that wistfulness is one of the few emotions that he's remotely capable of conveying, which brings us to Jason Aldean himself. And let's put aside the mixing that often just places him a shade too deep to let his slightly higher tones cut through the mix properly. When I call this album one-dimensional, I'm referring to Jason Aldean himself. Forget subtlety or tone that might imply rawness or sharper emotions. Instead, he just bullishly bellows his way through tracks with none of the deeper presence that you get from a Chris Young or Randy Houser or even Luke Bryan, but none of the bite of all the hard rock singers that he plainly idolizes. I get there is an appeal to being stoic on this sort of project, but Jason Aldean's brand of it is so flat and gruff and often completely wrong for the subject matter that sucks all the masculine appeal out of it and just rings as borderline unpleasant and unfunny and unfun. Every song Jason Aldean makes seem like so much work for him, and as such, when Kelsey Ballerini shows up and tries to give a more expressive performance, even in his lane, he's got as much chemistry with her as a medium-sized boulder. Or given how watery and muddy some of the textures can be on that song, maybe a washing machine, I think. And that's really what They Don't Know feels like to me. It's a functional product, meant to fill time on country radio between more interesting and charismatic performers, somehow losing the courage or artistic intent to at least try for more diverse sounds. In other words, he's the Maroon 5 of country music, full of attempts at macho swagger that too often fall embarrassingly flat. Granted, I can't get angry at this. Mediocrity is very different to outright awfulness. I don't hate boring, and this album doesn't quite take enough missteps to truly fall into the pits of truly awful country albums that have come out this decade, but it certainly is mediocre and forgettable enough to earn a very light 5 out of 10 and no recommendation. Even for Jason Aldean fans, this feels like a cash-in. He's done more, he's done better on earlier albums. I would skip this. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe. I'd be more than grateful. I know Jason Aldean fans are probably angry. Got the poll up here. You can tell me how wrong I am, but really, there was nothing to this album he hasn't done before and done better, and this record was just such a chore to get through. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any of the records coming out that you want me to take a look at, I will try to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.
Those folks ain't lived in our lives. They